Hi, this is Richard Blade, and you're listening to the Blue Zone Podcast Network as it presents Permanent Record, an in-depth look at the classic albums of the 70s and 80s, albums which have earned a permanent place of honor, both in our hearts and in our record collections.
Welcome to the Permanent Record Podcast. It's Brian and Sarah. We don't have time to introduce ourselves individually because we are on a very tight schedule today, Sarah.
Time is of the essence.
So yeah, this is an exciting episode. Wow, this is a tie-in episode with a fantastic radio show called Synthpop Symphony.
Yeah, it's hosted by DJ Matt Williams, and he was kind enough to reach out to us and asked if we wanted to do a collaboration with him, and we eagerly agreed.
You know there's nothing that I like more than hearing my voice ring out on terrestrial radio, Sarah, so I was very pleased to accept that generous offer.
Oh yeah, this is a super exciting opportunity for us, and Matt's such a great guy. We have had a wonderful time getting to know him and talking with him, and I hope that'll come through in this episode.
I hope so too. His show is fantastic. If you are a fan of the music we talk about on our podcast, his show is definitely right up your alley. He's got brand new mixes for like all of our favorite bands. He has a 2-hour show, and within the 2 hours, I think he says on the episode here, you're always going to hear Depeche Mode because they're like one of the building blocks.
Right.
You know, Human League, Erasure, Eurythmics, all these bands that we love, they're in there along with some of the new bands that are inspired by the music that we all love.
Yeah, he really seamlessly blends the past, the present, and the future together. I don't know how he does the future, but somehow he does it.
He has great insight.
Indeed.
Synthpop Symphony is broadcast on over 40 stations around the world, heard in over 60 countries. So I love that maybe someone in Germany happened to hear us rattling on about Red Flag.
I know.
On Synthpop Symphony.
Yeah, that's super cool. We're, again, really excited about this. We hope that if you came to us from listening to Synthpop Symphony, if you didn't know about us before, we hope that you will stick around and listen to some more of our stuff.
Yeah, that would be great. I think that we have a really good opportunity for our audiences to cross over. You know, we have episodes, if you look at our back catalog, Depeche Mode, Erasure, Thompson Twins, Human League,
Pet Shop Boys,
Tears for Fears, all these bands that I think we all love. So welcome if this is your first time subjecting yourself to our ramblings, and we hope that you will find something that you like in our back catalog.
For sure.
And thanks again to DJ Matt Williams. He is a fantastic guy. I've really enjoyed our time talking to him on the show and also offline, you know, just kind of getting to know him and chit-chatting about music. It's been a real pleasure.
I second that.
So this is a compliment to episode 294 of Synthpop Symphony, Sarah, where you and I participate in that episode's installment of the School of Synth.
Yeah, that's right. It was a really fun, kind of a deep dive for him at least. We go deeper here, but his deep dive looks at the band's history and spotlights the songs by actually playing the entire songs.
So if you combine his show with ours, you're going to get a very well-rounded education on the West Coast / Liverpool synth pop band Red Flag.
Yeah, that's right.
It was a real treat to get to revisit Red Flag. We both loved Naïve Art.
Definitely.
But I think that maybe we didn't know a whole lot about Red Flag, about their history, so it was kind of cool to get the opportunity to research them and present the facts as they are here on this episode along with Matt. It's a pleasure to welcome him to our show. So why don't we get to it?
We should indeed get to it.
This is the first part of our conversation, the first half of our conversation with DJ Matt Williams from synthpopsymphony.com, and we are talking about Red Flag.
Here we go.
All right, so this is extremely exciting. We are here today to talk about a band that I didn't think we would ever really talk about on the podcast, Sarah, even though I love them.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't see that we would wind ourselves down this pathway, but here we are. Part of the reason that we're getting to do it is because of the man who is here with us today on the podcast. It is DJ Matt Williams of Synthpop Symphony, and we are sort of entering a exciting relationship with Matt. I don't know if he's excited. I looked at his picture on his website, and he didn't look very excited. Matt, are you excited to be here with us today?
I am super excited to be here today. I am just elated. This is a super cool thing to be on this famous podcast. I'm so happy to be here with you guys.
Famous, huh?
Infamous? maybe?
I don't know. I just sort of thought that we were famous here in our hometown. I didn't know that our fame, I'm putting that in quotes, I didn't know that reached out to the West Coast of the United States.
Absolutely, because a lot of this music originated on the West Coast, right? Today we're talking about a band who pretty much was from San Diego when they first started doing all their music, even though I think they weren't originally from San Diego.
That's right. So, Matt, you are the host of a great show called Synthpop Symphony. Before we get talking about Red Flag, what's the deal with that show?
The show is basically a way, it's a love letter to the 80s, basically, for the most part. And what I mean by that is, as a Gen Xer myself, I play all the 80s new wave music that people love, and mostly the dance stuff and all synth pop based music, right? So all electronic dance music. So Depeche Mode is obviously the headliner of each week. Played Erasure, New Order. We play, all the stuff that people love, but we also play a lot of new music from these artists as well. So bands like New Order have been putting out new music in the last 5 years. Howard Jones just released music in the last 5 years. We had a new Heaven 17 single come out a couple of weeks ago. We've got all these 80s bands that, are legacy bands, and they're putting out new music. I always look at like legacy versus kind of heritage bands. I think a heritage band is a band that is now no longer interested in putting out any new music anymore. They're more interested in playing festivals and cruise ships and things like that, and there's a lot of those bands out there. But there's a lot of other artists that are in the studio making music today. And so I wanted to make sure that their new music was being heard as well as the classics. And then as far as the classics are concerned, try to dive a little deeper than just the hits. We try to go a little bit deeper into, album tracks and other tracks that are very popular by the bands themselves and people who are fans of them. And then the third thing we try to do is get into the future of synth-driven music by playing bands that you may not have heard of before, bands that are influenced by these 80s artists, bands that grew up listening to Depeche Mode and New Order and bands like that. And now they want to make that same kind of music. So the show is called The Past, Present, and the Future of Synth-Driven Music. And that's kind of how we kind of put the whole thing together. So it's a part spoken, me talking about the music and playing single tracks. And then we do a lot of mixes on the show. So the show goes into a Saturday night type of mix, like you maybe hear on First Wave at night, maybe a DJ Bueller type of mix. That's what we're doing too, except we're playing stuff that's a little bit more reimagined versus the original mixes. We're playing a lot of newer versions and trying to amp it up a little bit to the current 2025 sounds. And that helps not only get the people who are Gen Xers interested in the music, but also maybe some younger generations that maybe think some of the original music sounds a little bit older. And so we try to make it sound a little fresher as well. So that's kind of where we're at. And then about 2-3 months ago, I started doing these things called School of Synth, where I just basically went into a little bit deeper talk about some bands. Nothing even close to the Permanent Record podcast, more of a 5-minute segment, just playing a couple of songs that are hits, maybe playing a couple of deeper tracks and just giving people a little bit of backstory on some of the artists they've been hearing on the show, because a lot of times they only hear the hits on the stations that are out there and they want to know, like, what's this other song he's playing and what album was that on? And maybe I can find it. So that is pretty much it. I started DJing in 1987, and here I am. Multiple radio shows. I started in college radio, been on commercial radio stations as a DJ, and played in a ton of clubs and parties, and even had my own club for a short period of time where I brought in some of these bands we're talking about, including Red Flag. So
no way.
So I actually met Chris and Mark back in '89 when they came to my club, my friend's club, to play. And they signed my Broken Heart record. So I have the vinyl, the Broken Heart red copy of the vinyl with their signatures on the front of it from that night.
Wow. That is so cool. I love that.
Yeah, I read online about that red vinyl copy, but I myself only have the regular black.
Quite a few copies of that red vinyl out there. It's not that hard to find. I see it popping up in Amoeba and record stores around Los Angeles from time to time. So they're out there.
I'll keep my eyes open. So if someone wanted to listen, they can actually find you on terrestrial radio, right? But they can also go to synthpopsymphony.com, and there are links to each and every show, right?
Correct. So we are a radio station or a terrestrial radio show first and foremost. So the show goes out to 49 radio stations in 60 countries starting on Mondays. And so every Monday, the new show comes out. And then the following, or that Sunday, it hits all the podcast platforms. So every single one you can think of, except for Spotify, which does not allow music-based podcasts on Spotify, unless they're like one of their big guys they sign with,
right.
They're huge trance guys or whatever. But every other place I'm on iHeartRadio, Deezer, Tidal, Amazon Music Podcasts, Apple Music Podcasts, all the major podcasting platforms, you can hear the show. And of course, like you said, synthpopsymphony.com, you can find the radio stations and times and the previous shows. There's 250 shows online to listen to at this point.
So much good music in those 250 shows. And you just mentioned, I know we have to talk about Red Flag, but I do want to ask you something. You just mentioned how you try to curate some of the new music of today, mix it with the old music of yesteryear to appeal to everybody and educate on the way synth pop is moving forward. I wanted to ask you, a few weeks ago in your show, you had what was considered a remix of the Human League, Keep Feeling Fascination.
Yes.
But as we were listening, Sarah and I were calling it a cover because it had a very German-sounding voice actually doing a lot of the vocals. And when the song was over, you called that a remix.
And so the conversation turned until the sun went down, and many fantasies were learned on that day. Keep feeling fascination, passion burning, love so strong. Keep feeling fascination, looking, learning, moving.
That was actually Ross Alexander, who is an artist that I've been playing a lot of lately, and he's been doing remakes of the Human League and other artists as well. So I may have miscategorized that as a remix instead of a remake. People have been covering songs since the beginning of time, right? And it seems like it's gotten to a fever pace in the synth pop world. I mean, really, it's wild. Like, we just had a guy named Christopher Anton, who's a synth pop artist, send me a remake of Celebrate the Nuns, Will You Be There last week.
I don't want to be alone. I like your innocence, my way to reconcile. I hope you won't take me for a ride. Will you be there when I ask you for what can I do when feeling insecure? Will you be there when I ask you for would you follow me anywhere?
So we get remakes all the time. And then we also get lots of remixes too, where these guys are completely ripping apart these tracks and redoing them from the ground up. Some of these remixers I found on YouTube, and they got discovered by a lot of these artists too, which is interesting. For instance, on the remix side, played an Erasure remix the other day from a remixer. His name is TSF from Buenos Aires. And he did a couple of bootleg remixes of Erasure Secrets and Time Hearts Full of Love off the latest Neon album.
Ooh, you wanted to let me down gently. I couldn't believe my eyes. Your shadow in the window, in the arms of another guy. Ooh, I'm on the scent. You're heaven sent. You send me down.
Andy and Vince from Erasure heard the remixes and they loved them, so they included them on their EP. So and I think they have a show actually they put out where they listen to people's remixes on. I think they have like a podcast where every once in a while they'll actually listen to people's remixes and then give the reviews of them and then figure out which ones they're actually going to include or like on their own EPs. It's funny.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
That's really cool to hear because, some artists are so precious with their material and they are like, no, don't change it. This is exactly the way I want it. It's nice to hear when somebody's open and welcoming to new versions and reimaginings like that. And in fact, including them on their own albums. That's super awesome.
Yeah, there's some talented people out there for sure.
And one other question before we get started. This upcoming episode that's going to feature Red Flag in the School of Synth. I don't know if you know this. I got a sneak peek at the track listing for that episode. And I noticed that near the bottom, there was the Blitz Kids covering Dead or Alive's Brand New Lover. And a lot of people who listen to our podcast are fans of Pete Burns and Dead or Alive. I haven't listened to it yet because I was getting ready to record with you today. But what's the story with this recording? Because right now it's the thing I want to listen to the most in the world.
So again, it goes back to that guy, Ross Alexander, I was talking about. He's a solo artist that it works with a really, really famous remixer. His name is Matt Pop. And Matt Pop remixes tons of different synth pop tracks for a lot of well-known artists. And somehow him and Ross have just become really close and they've just been putting out a ton of remix or remakes of other people's songs. So Brand New Lover was one of them. Did you hear the remix by any chance,
I
Brian?
didn't listen yet. No.
It's really good. I mean, it definitely is true to the original. And I think that's what I like about the Blitz Kids is they're true to the originals. And that Blitz Kids is actually Ross Alexander. He's out now under the Blitz Kids name now. And he's released a 3 CD set under the Blitz Kids name with like tons and tons of remakes of 80s tracks. It's a really good listen. It's actually really well done. Not just that, he does Animotion's Obsession, which is probably one of his best remakes I've ever heard. And he did Certain Things Are Likely by KTP, which is another really, really good one. So he's got some good remixes out there. Definitely check that one out. It's a good remake.
I am very excited to hear about this, and I think we will definitely be checking it out in the future, in the very near future.
Right. We're driving to Philadelphia tomorrow for a concert. So we'll be on the road for about 4 hours total. So we saved your new episode for the drive.
Awesome.
But we are here today to talk about the aforementioned duo Red Flag.
That's right.
So why don't we get into that, see what we can come up with. Let's start at the beginning and kind of work our way up, give a little overview of the history of Red Flag. Sarah, give us a fact from the very early days.
Okay.
Go back as far as you want to.
As far as I want to. Okay. First of all, let's just name who's in this band. It's a duo. It's formed by two brothers, Chris and Mark Reynolds. That's kind of cool. You don't see a lot of sibling bands in this genre. But these guys were born in Liverpool, England, and they moved to San Diego in about 1979. They moved around a lot because their father was a British naval officer. They didn't stay in one place for too long. They ended up in California. They got to San Diego. They kind of set up roots there, and that's where they began their music career.
And then, Matt, when did you actually discover Red Flag?
I discovered Red Flag when I was in college radio. So in 1988, I got sent the copy of Broken Heart. It was a promo copy, which is interesting because if you look online, it looks like Broken Heart isn't considered the first single ever released, but it actually was a promo single sent to me. I think it was more of a club DJ radio promo kind of single. So that's the first one I ever heard from them. And that's how I got into them.
So you were not aware of them in the mid-'80s, around 84, when they had, I'm sure you saw this when you were doing your research, Extra FM 91X released a compilation of local bands called Local Heroes, and that featured the first song that Chris and Mark ever recorded. It was called Distant Memories, recorded under the name of Shades of May.
Distant memories, how they feel just like a dream. Distant memories, and all I want to do is scream. Distant memories, now they're playing on my mind. Those distant memories. Oh no.
Yeah, that came out in 1984, and they were still teenagers at the time. I was trying to get an understanding of how old they were. I never did find out how old they were, but I know that they were still teens when they put that song out. It sounds pretty good.
Mark was born in 1971, so that would make him what? He was 84, so he was like 13 years old at the time.
Wow.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We weren't doing that at age 13.
People always hear about the legendary K-Rock, when we talk about alternative music. Was this 91X, was that a comparable station?
Yeah, it's a station in San Diego that is broadcast from Baja, California, Mexico, believe it or not, into the San Diego area. And it was, at the time, when I was growing up in the 80s, there was like 3 major stations in California that all were, I thought, were pretty much on the same level. You had 91X in San Diego, K-Rock in Los Angeles, and Live 105 in San Francisco. And I grew up in Central California, so I was able to listen to all these stations. I would go to San Francisco on the weekends or LA on the weekends and listen to these stations and even go down to San Diego. So 98.1X was a fantastic station at the time. I haven't listened to it in years, though.
You are so lucky that you had all that access to fantastic, groundbreaking music where you lived. We did not have that where we were.
That is true. We did not. But I took a look at that song, Distant Memories by Shades of May. I was sitting here listening to it, and then it kind of hit me. Hey, my favorite Red Flag song, we're not going to talk about it today because it was such a long song that I didn't submit it to you for my choice. But my favorite song by Red Flag is All Roads Lead to You. And when I was thinking about it, as I was sitting here watching the YouTube video of Shades of May, I said, hey, wait a second. I think they say Shades of May in that song.
Oh.
They say Shades of May have learned how to stay. We shall find our own way. That's the way it was way back when.
Whoa. So it's a callback to their early days with the other band name.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
That's cool. That is super cool.
So then at some point between 84 and 88, they changed the name to Red Flag. When you call your band Red Flag, you're going to get mentioned because it was the 80s. It was the Cold War.
Yeah.
Was this, do you think, a good move on their part or a bad move?
You know, they always say there's no such thing as bad publicity. And of course, they claim that they chose the name due to its warning for surfers. You know, it's a flag they put up at beaches to say, oh, the surfing conditions are no good. But they couldn't help but have those other ideas and connotations in mind when they came up with the name. I'm sure that this was a good thing to do.
I kind of agree. I mean, it's interesting because, yeah, when I heard Red Flag and all the Cold War stuff, this is 1989 or 88. This is like fall of the Berlin Wall, right? So Red Flag just kind of sounded to me like they were trying to make some sort of a statement, but I didn't know quite what it was because I was 19 years old when it came out. So
I hear you. So in 1988, the duo signed their first record deal, and it was with Enigma Records. And that's where they released their first album, Naïve Art, which is what we're mainly discussing today. And then a remix project, I think a year later, called Naïve Dance came out, which is also really good. But just because Enigma had some pretty cool bands, I thought at the time that, oh, Enigma must be a great record label. But Sarah and I just last week watched the Devo documentary on Netflix. And Devo came out saying that Enigma Records was not good. And they were there for a short while and seemed to hate it. Do you know anything about Enigma Records and what kind of operation it was?
what I know about Enigma Records was they were kind of all over the place. They had, like you said, they had Devo signed for a while. They had Poison signed, and they had Stacy Q.
When we're together, it's like hot coals in a fire. Hot baby, my body's burning, so come on, heat my desire. Come on, come on. Two hearts that beat as one. Two hearts, I need you, I need you. Two hearts that beat as one. Two hearts, come on.
So Stacy Q was kind of their big artist in 1986, right? Two of Hearts and all that came out. But then I think by around 1989, she was not really relevant anymore. I think the label was starting to falter. From what I've been told, they put all their marbles into Red Flag at the very end of this record label, pretty much. They thought that Naïve Art was going to be a huge hit. They kind of put all their marbles behind this. And then when it didn't happen, then the label started going out of business. And from what I've been told is it pretty much came with the 1992 with the grunge hitting and everything. It just wiped them out. And they didn't really have any major artists on their label that were really bringing them any substantial money in. That's pretty much all I know about them. I know that John St. James, one of the producers, produced Berlin and Stacy Q. So he was also working with Enigma Records at the time. And that's how they kind of got John St. James, involved with that whole project.
Yeah.
So they were trying to use Enigma Records artists and producers and people like that to try to help a little bit. And so that's when I think they used Stacy Q for 1989, right? For Broken Heart.
Yeah, I read a story that in March of 1988, Red Flag performed at a DJ convention and John St. James was there. He was also head of Synthesized Records, which was an offshoot of Enigma Records. Like he had his own kind of sub-label under Enigma Records. So John offered to produce the brothers, and then they went into the studio for an all-day session, and that's when they recorded Broken Heart. Stacy Q was there at that recording session, and she provided some backing vocals and coaching for Mark, vocal coaching.
Interesting.
What do you guys think? If this record had been released 4 years earlier, would it have been a hit?
Naïve Art?
Yeah.
In like 1985? Sure.
I think yes. And I'll tell you why. Because you had all these bands that were, I kind of call them like the second wave of synth. It was like around 1988, 89. You had all this wave of bands that showed up, like Anything Box, Cause and Effect, Information Society, right? Camouflage. And these bands were signed to these labels, and these labels put a lot of weight behind them, and then they just disappeared. You know, like every one of these artists had one or two records, and then that was it. The labels dropped them all, and it was over. So I just find it very interesting. What would have happened if all those bands I just mentioned had released albums in 1985 or even maybe 1986? Would it have been different? Because like Book of Love put their album out in 1985. Dead or Alive Youthquake, 1985, right? You had all these bands in there's a whole OMD. All these records in 1985 were huge. Some of the most influential new wave and synth pop albums of all time. So I'm kind of leaning toward yes, it probably would have made a big difference if it hadn't have been so close to the end of the 80s and early 90s.
I remember when we talked to Rob Rowe from Cause and Effect, I was quick to blame the demise of synth pop on grunge. And he actually said that he thinks just as poisonous to the synth pop movement was a kind of America First movement that was happening in radio, where they really wanted to focus on U.S. American bands and not play the British bands. And unfortunately, for a lot of groups like Cause and Effect, people assumed they were from Britain because of the way they sound.
Yeah, and they were from Sacramento.
Right. Yeah, and then Red Flag would fall into that same category again.
Right.
They sound like Depeche Mode. They sound like a British synth pop band, and yet they're from California. Yeah, certainly part of the problem with any kind of success is always going to be the promotion. You know, how well do the companies and the managers do getting this record out for people to listen to? You know, that's always an issue. I would like to think that in 85 might have been a little bit easier for some of this stuff to catch fire and make it onto the airwaves than it was in 88, 89.
Yeah, because you had a lot of synth pop tracks that actually did hit the US airwaves, like People Are People by Depeche Mode. There was a bunch of songs that actually made it into the Billboard Top 100 from synth pop acts, right? But it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a huge amount of them, but there were some, you know, in Berlin and other people that made it there. Eurythmics, and there was a bunch of synth pop bands that did make it, but it was really rough because those bands that we're talking about, like I just mentioned, like Eurythmics and Berlin and stuff, they had their heydays in the mid 80s. By the late 80s, when these other bands like Anything Box and Cause and Effect and Red Flag were coming out, those legacy artists were already starting to have troubles. They were already starting to have issues getting good records out and trying to find success with any singles, right? I mean, it's just, that's the way it was.
Yeah, we talk about a lot of artists having the imperial phase, you know, where they can do no wrong. Every song's a hit. They're all over the place, getting lots of publicity, lots of success. I think even synth pop as a whole, as a genre in the 80s had this imperial phase. And as we got to the later 80s, it was kind of waning. And so anything related to that genre was going to have more trouble becoming successful just because people were getting tired of it, you know, or the record companies and producers and promoters were looking for the next big thing already. They're like, this is old. We need something new.
I would say absolutely 100% that statement is correct. I mean, people were starting to get sick of the record labels were making some huge mistakes in the late 80s. What they were trying to do is they were trying to repeat the successes of some of their artists. Like Dead or Alive is a classic example. You had the production team of Stock Aitken Waterman remixing Dead or Alive, Divine, Rick Astley, Bananarama, and every one of those remixes sounded exactly the same.
Yeah.
And by 1990, people were like, okay, guys, like, what else do you got here? Because this all the hand claps and cowbells thing was great for a few years. But then after a while, it's like, guys, I mean, what's next? And that it ultimately was their demise, right? And now they're back, which is funny because everyone wants to hear those remixes again. So now you have Pete Hammond and all these guys that were part of that whole thing are now more popular than ever, remixing anybody's songs to sound like that 1985 Dead or Alive, You Spin Me Around sound.
Yep.
And I play a few of those artists on my show today that are shockingly very similar, but extremely good though.
How good is that Pete Hammond Dead or Alive, the remixes?
Absolutely fantastic. Just wonderful. I played every single one of them on our show. We put them in tons of mixes. They're just the best of the best.
Yeah, that's the kind of remix I want to hear. You know, it's new, but it doesn't sound crazy new, and it's still true to the original song. Fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of those original mixes don't have a lot of oomph to them. They don't have like that deep bass. They're a little tinty. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool when Pete Hammond goes through and really just bumps them up and really makes them just sound extremely powerful for 2025. I love that.
And another thing I just want to comment on that you said, just because I'm a music nerd and this is not related to Red Flag, but you mentioned the success of People Are People in 1984, 1985 here in the US as a single. To this day, I'm still frustrated and get mad about it That song was very successful out of nowhere.
American Top 40s heard in the 50 states and around the world on great radio stations like WKHQ, Charlevoix, Petoskey, Gaylord, and Traverse City, Michigan. All Hit 99, KLBQ, El Dorado, Arizona, and Hit Radio BJ 105, Orlando, Florida. Here's the first American pop hit for an English band with a French name. 4 musicians who call themselves Depeche Mode. That's also the name of a fashion trade magazine in France. Debuting at number 33, here's Depeche Mode with People Are People. With their first chart single on American Top 40, debuting this week at number 33, Depeche Mode from England with People Are People.
But it didn't help the band in the top 40 charts, at least. I actually don't even think they released another 7-inch single off of Some Great Reward here in the U.S. I think the next 7-inch single was Shake the Disease, which did absolutely nothing. And it's such a great song. The success of People Are People is crazy.
Yeah, it's just such a flash in the pan kind of thing. It's such an anomaly, really, is what it is. It just happened, and then nothing else happened for a couple of years.
It was really weird. You would think, right, that they would just, after that one hit, they would just start to just become a hit factory like Duran Duran was, right? Just putting out one after another. But it never happened that way for them. I don't know.
Yet they seem to have done okay. I think they're...
It shocks me that a band can put out a ton of underground singles, a ton of music that never really ever charted here in the United States, and they sell out 4 nights at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles with fireworks. Like, I mean,
right. Yeah.
It's incredible, right? Like, you guys have had very little airplay on major mainstream radio, except for maybe 3 or 4 songs, and yet just you can't even get into their shows. They're super.
I think a common tagline or a phrase associated with them is like the biggest band that you've never heard of.
That's so true. That's so true.
So speaking of live bands, guys, I did see that Red Flag in this time period that we're talking about, along with headlining some shows of their own to promote Naïve Art, they actually got to open for some great acts like Devo, Thomas Dolby, Book of Love, and Real Life. Matt, you mentioned you had seen Red Flag back in the day. Did you see, 2 questions. Did you see them open for any of those bands? And when you saw them do a solo show, like what sort of crowd was Red Flag able to draw in California?
I have the distinction of being a club DJ and a radio DJ at the exact same time. So I see songs from the club side of things as well as the radio side of things. So at the time those songs were coming out, I was DJing on 2 radio stations, college and commercial radio, and I had a club with some friends. So before Naïve Art even came out, we had already had Russian Radio and Broken Heart. We booked Red Flag to come to the club. So they played our club in 89. So right before Naïve Art came out. So yeah, we brought Chris and Mark in. I don't think they had to pay that much money because nobody really knew who they were. But the club was packed. You know, we had a great time. Everybody loved the music. It was a big club hit. So Russian Radio was such a big club hit for our club. Every time we played it, the dance floor filled up. So it was not a hard thing to get them to come and play for the people that wanted to hear them. And I thought they did a great job, but I never saw them ever again. Just that one time.
Oh, really?
I did not have the pleasure of getting to see them again. It was really...
Well, it sounds like you were working all the time. You know, DJing and running a club. Yeah, you were probably very busy.
Hey, you know, however, some people always say, how could you have missed that show? How could you have missed that concert? You know, sometimes it just happens, right? For one thing or another.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. At least you were playing the music.
You were hosting a show in your college radio station and on a real radio station at the same time?
Yeah, I had a college radio show where I was doing whatever I wanted to do, playing, just having fun. And then a commercial mix show, a 2-hour Saturday night mix show called the Underground Lounge, where I just played what you would hear on First Wave. Exactly the same. Just a mix of all 80s new wave music. It was extremely popular, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And then would record it on 2 reel-to-reels back in the day.
Oh.
And then you would put those reel-to-reels in the mailbox of the DJ who was going to be DJing that night, and he would throw them on the reel-to-reel players and play them. And I would be DJing at the club at the same time. People would be like, "Hey, I just heard you on the radio. What are you doing here? What are you doing at the club? I just heard."
How can you be 2 places at once?
I know. I was all the time.
That's
so
amazing.
Crazy. I'm very jealous of you. I, of course, had a college radio show that I enjoyed doing a lot. But the guy who followed my show, he also did what you did. He worked at the college station, but he also was a real radio DJ. And I always felt terrible whenever I left and he came in, because I could never get out of the building in time to avoid hearing him come on the air. And his voice was so much better than mine. And he just sounded like a real DJ as opposed to me. His name was Ricochet, which I always got a kick out of because I know it's not his real name. Too cool to be a real name.
Ricochet.
So in 1991, I'm going to skip to 91, guys. Enigma folds and Red Flag signs for a very brief amount of time with IRS Records. And they released one song, and that was called Machines.
Raise my hand and speak my peace. One love.
I actually remember this song coming out. I never actually saw a copy that I could buy, but I remember reading about it in magazines at the time. Was that a song that was on your radar?
Absolutely. And I actually have an extra copy of that. So I'll send you the copy, Brian. I have 2 copies of Machine. So
What? Are you serious?
Yeah. I got those as promos sent to the station. I never saw this stupid record for sale anywhere. I only got it as a promo sent to the radio station. So the commercial radio station I was working at. So,
Whoa.
And then about 6 years ago, I was at Amoeba Records in Los Angeles and found another copy. And I just bought it because I was like, it's $1. And I know someone's going to want it someday, and that person is you.
No
Wow. Oh my
Hey, let me
God.
interrupt the show. Let me interrupt the show here with a list of everything else I want.
Yeah, I know.
While we're talking.
No, I
My
appreciate
shopping
that.
No,
list
that's
here.
awesome.
Yeah, I need the unreleased copy of no.
No, it's very kind of you. Thank you.
But that song came out in 92, right? I thought that was a fantastic track. There's actually one remix of it though that I just love, and I played it on the show not too long ago.
Ooh, I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, I'll look that up.
The one that I like the most is the Hammer and Saw mix. It sounds like, do you remember when Broken Heart got remixed for the Naïve Art album by Joseph Watt? It sounds a lot different than
Yeah.
the original single does, right? The original version of Machines had a very, very stripped down sound, very similar to Broken Heart when it was released. And then the remixes sound a lot more like the remix of Broken Heart for Naïve Art. The beats are more progressive. It just sounds a little bit more dancey and a little bit more high energy. It just kind of elevates it up a little bit.
That sounds good.
What's interesting is for a track that didn't get much airplay that I thought, it hit number 44 in the Billboard Hot Dance Club Play.
Yeah, that's pretty good for like no publicity.
Yeah, like barely on the label and just
The single was also re-released in 2000, and all the tracks from the 1992 release were there. And then they also had a Razormaid remix of Rescue that was available on another Razormaid level 4 or level 1. Sorry. For anybody who doesn't know who Razormaid is, maybe I should give them just a slight background. So Razormaid is a DJ subscription service that was released by Joseph Watt and Art Mayhark back in the early or mid 80s. If you were a DJ in the 80s, you had to have Razormaids, and they were so cool. You would call up this 1-800 number, and it would play all the tracks that were going to be remixed for the next issue that was going to be coming out. And they would mail you a 2-record set. There was a die-cut record set, and every vinyl was a 2-vinyl set, and every vinyl was a different color. So they put a lot of time into packaging these things out. And Joseph Watt said they would spend all day hand packaging these Razormaid records to go out to the DJs. So if you ever run across a Razormaid record in a store, buy them because they're really cool. But the DJs loved them, and we played those Razormaid records everywhere. And then he started producing albums for other bands, and then he started working with Chris and Mark on the Red Flag album, Naïve Art. And the Razormaid remixes that came out for Red Flag in the 80s were some of the best. And those wound up on the Naïve Art special editions.
And I think a lot of them are on the Naïve Dance CD as well. But yeah, I remember as a kid, like if you could stumble across anything that said Razormaid mix on it, you would buy it because it just seemed like super cool.
anytime you see the word Razormaid, you're like, okay, this is going to be excellent.
I always had my eyes open for Joseph Watt because the very first 12-inch I ever bought in my whole life, he actually worked on both sides, the A and the B. It was the Depeche Mode, Master and Servant, US Black and Blue version, backed with Set Me Free or Motivate Me 12-inch mix. And I thought those sounded fantastic. So I just kept my eyes open for that name. After a while in the 80s, I think around like 86 or 87, I was completely won over that Phil Harding was the greatest remixer. I called him I think it said on some records, the mix master Phil Harding. So I sort of followed suit. But I still always loved Razormaid as well.
Yeah, Razormaid was cool because I think, I could be wrong, but I think the name Razormaid came from the fact that Joseph and Art were actually re-editing these songs on tape.
Yeah.
Using a razor to cut them, to re-edit them. That's exactly what I did when I did my show at the commercial radio station. We recorded on reel-to-reel, and if I made a mistake, we just cut it out and redo the mix and splice it in. So I'm very familiar with how to edit via tape. And then I think as time went on, they started really getting into the more musical aspects of remixing and really starting to rewrite some of the actual musical tracks. And I know there was a couple of songs that I really loved that they redid, that they did that too. So, but yeah, Phil Harding was spectacular when it came to remixing back in the 80s.
Another vote for Phil Harding then.
Yep,
All
gotta
right.
love that. The Mixmaster.
Mixmaster, yes.
Yep.
I'll make your heart smile. Pain, 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 pain. Will you take the pain I will give to you again and again? And will you return it?
In 1993, Mark and Chris formed their own label. They realized that things weren't working out the way that they had hoped that they would. They had to fall back on Plan B, and they created Plan B Records.
Aha.
And Plan B is going to be the home for all of Red Flag's subsequent releases up until the very end. I'm going to consider the end of Red Flag to be in 2023, because that is when Chris announced that he was retiring the name Red Flag, but he was still going to release music. It would just be under his name.
I read the same thing.
Something that maybe we should talk about this right now, because it happens now on this timeline that I'm sort of forcing us to stick to. Mark, the vocalist of Red Flag, is going to pass away in April of 2003. So for 2003 to 2023, Red Flag, even though some people still refer to them as a duo, at that point they were not a duo. It was just Chris.
Yeah, and he didn't do anything as a band after his brother's passing until I think 2007. That was when he started up again.
Yeah, so in 2007, Chris starts to release work again under the name of Red Flag, but Red Flag is a very different sound than the Red Flag that we're listening to here with Naïve Art. I think they kind of had started to change even before this. Red Flag gets, I don't even know, you know labels of music, Matt, better than I do, because like on your website, you talk about how you play electropop and synth pop and synth wave, and I don't have an understanding, I don't think, of how all things get classified. Later, Red Flag, my vocabulary is just to say that it was darker and sounded a little more gothic, even though it doesn't sound like Peter Murphy or something like that. What do you classify the later Red Flag stuff as?
You're in heaven, I'm in hell. I hear the sound of ringing. Or is someone singing?
It was definitely more industrial, darker, and it sounded muddier to me. It had a more muddy sound. And what I mean by that is it wasn't this clean synth pop sound that they had before. It was more experimental and darker and just more experimental sounding to me. I think that's probably the best word I can use, experimental. It sounded like they were trying to either find a new sound, or maybe that's just what they decided to do. I'm not quite sure. I will put in a little bit of tidbit here. During COVID in 2020, Joseph Watt from Razormaid decided to do some Zoom remix sessions with his friends. So he put them up on Facebook, and anybody who wanted to join could join. So I was on those remix sessions, and they were very deep. They went into remixing some pretty crazy stuff. But then toward the end of those remix sessions, Joseph Watt made an announcement that him and Chris were actually going to join forces, and Chris was going to be the new other half of Razormaid. And so they were going to start releasing new music through Razormaid with him and Chris. So there was 2 sessions that I was on where there was a brand new Red Flag song. So I actually have a copy of it, but I'm not going to play it for anybody or release it because I don't think I'm allowed to. But I was on that session and we remixed this song for Red Flag, but it's a very darker industrial sounding track, and the vocals are not very easy to hear. So to make a long story short, he was there with Joseph. Like you said, I think that was the beginning of the end. Probably, like you said, 2023 was probably the very, very end. And then 2020 was the beginning of the end. And then after COVID, Joseph was going to do this tour where he was going to tour all these different cities and play all of his Razormaid remixes for people in clubs. And then I think he had a heart attack or something happened and he had to like kind of back down from doing what he was going to do. So he's kind of went a little dark on Facebook. He's made a couple of comments that he's okay, but he's just had to step back a little bit, I think, because of some health issues. But I wish him the best, and I hope he gets back out there because I would love to see him go to the clubs and play all these remixes on vinyl live for people at the clubs. Would just be a phenomenal thing to see. And I don't know what happened with Razormaid from this point on. It sounds like it never happened from what I can tell, because there hasn't been any new Razormaid releases since then.
Yeah, and he's keeping his health issues kind of low key. Like he does mention it on social media, but it's never a post in and of itself. It's always like in response to somebody's question. So you have to sort of go digging to find it.
Yeah, the last email I had from Joseph was 2021. He sent me all the remixes they remastered a bunch of Razormaid remixes. So he sent me all the remastered ones to play on Synthpop Symphony.
Oh, wow.
And that was the last time I've had any contact with him. Such a sweet man. He's just the best. He's just a great guy. I hope he comes back and gives people his unique take on synthpop, because he's one of the best.
Yeah, he's an icon for sure.
Yeah, if you go read some of the history of Razormaid online, I mean, there are people that talk about how important it was to the clubs in the West Coast, San Francisco and stuff at the time, because when he started, we were kind of at that difficult period that maybe we haven't ever talked about it on the show, but I think about it a lot because of my love of the Bee Gees. But the whole like death to disco kind of movement, getting rid of the dance music that was on the radio. He started Razormaid, started mixing songs for dance clubs very soon after that. And if you read some of those websites, it talks about how it really inspired people to go back into the clubs and have fun again.
Yeah, and what was really cool about Razormaid from a DJ's perspective, and what's funny is people today will listen to the remixes and go, why is there just beats for the first minute? Well, it's because it's made for DJs to mix into the songs. We need the intro. We need a 1 minute intro and a 1 minute outro to mix in and mix out of these tracks, right?
Right.
And so a lot of these bands, they just right out of the gate, first beat is they're singing a song. And it's like,
No.
I can't play this at a club, folks. So extended versions, you've got to have them if you're a club DJ.
Yeah, you need a way in and a way out.
Yeah. I have people who didn't even know what a 12-inch single means. They didn't know that 12-inch was the actual size of a record album.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not everybody thinks about it as much as we do.
Yeah.
But you have a 45 record adapter as your logo. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's what that is. Snap that in the middle of your 45 and boom, you're good to go.
Yep.
Now this is the most common 45 adapter, and you see this thing on t-shirts and mugs and a bunch of stuff, and it's really, really easy to put in. Simply take the adapter, grab it through the record like this, position one of these arms on the side, and just simply follow through, and you can make an adjustment, and it should be able to spin inside the center, but not come out. And to take it out, just simply kind of hit it with your finger. It comes straight out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Going back to this darkness of later day Red Flag, I just wanted to share a few sentences of an interview I read with Chris. I didn't write down when it was. I forget when it was, but it's from a Russian magazine called Shout.
Oh,
and
I saw that.
they asked him about the change in Red Flag's musical direction. And I'm very interested in this. I hate to say this, but I'm interested in it because I always felt disappointed by Red Flag going in this direction. I don't really like the darker, more industrial sound. And I kind of felt like, I was personally getting ripped off by by them because I don't have any more albums that sound like Naïve Art. I know it's not all about me, but I do think about this sometimes. So the magazine asked him about the change in musical direction, and Chris said, I could still write 80s style pop tunes. However, I like hard music. I like dark music. I like powerful music that has a driving force. I called this massive music, songs that build up with an intense bass line, then wham, the drums come down and the story begins. My songs tell a story with or without lyrics. In my music, I try to present a journey to the listener, a mini opera that unfolds and carries the listener along. That journey is sometimes dark, sometimes gloomy, but often exciting and surprising, which I thought was very interesting. It's funny, like a lot of those things that he says, intense bass line, then wham, the drums come in, and the story starts. That could describe synthpop. Like, you don't have
That could also describe trance.
Yeah.
Well,
But I don't know. Him saying he wants to take the listener on a journey, I think that's cool. But I hate to be the person that says this, because I criticize people who say this about groups like Depeche Mode. Like, how many times can you see someone online say, "I wish they still sounded like they did when Alan was in the band"? But here I am saying, "I wish Red Flag still sounded like Naïve Art."
Well, you like what you like.
I just don't like that really scary singing that he does. And here's the reason why it really bothers me, folks. I'm a big fan of James Bond.
Oh, yes.
People may not know this about me. I mean, I only force James Bond references into like every episode of the podcast. But when work was being done on what was going to become the 20th Bond film, marking the 40th anniversary of the series, ultimately it turns out to be one of their worst movies ever, but it was called Die Another Day. There were reports in the press at the time that Red Flag had submitted a song called Beyond the Ice for theme song consideration. Some sites, I remember this, some sites back at the time were saying this was a done deal. This is actually going to be the song. It ultimately turns out to not be. Madonna is going to have the theme song with Die Another Day. But the working title of the film was Beyond the Ice, and that is the name of the song that Red Flag recorded that supposedly was going to be their James Bond theme. But it's really confusing because Chris really has never really spoken about it. I couldn't find any interviews where he talks about it, and I saw an article that mentioned that he has never spoken about it.
Do you think he's not allowed to?
I don't know. I think that it maybe was just kind of a weird way to get the name Red Flag out there again. I can't imagine that Red Flag was seriously going to have a James Bond theme.
well, maybe in his mind, but I mean, I don't think there would ever be a serious consideration. I mean, every Bond movie song that's ever come out has been from a very, very popular or famous artist of the time. In fact, a lot of the Bond songs, if you notice, are very much of the time, right? You just look at View to a Kill, even Garbage has done, Madonna, all these different bands have done, and artists have done James Bond tracks that have been extremely influential at the time. So maybe Red Flag could have a song on the album, but I don't think they would have been the title track to the movie.
And I would just like to know, I mean, if it's real, I would like to know how Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson were even aware of them at the time. Like, it blows my mind.
How did it even get to the point where you were seeing this in multiple places? And who started this story? How did it grow? And crazy. Okay, so we've talked about where the band went, but let's go back to where they were at this time when the album was being made. They were signed to Enigma Records in 1988. The album, Naïve Art, was recorded at Platinum Island Studios in New York City. And there's a producer on here that we should know. We know the name, Mr. Paul Robb of Information Society.
Oh, we love Paul Robb.
Yeah, he did a lot of stuff back then and still, of course, doing stuff now. And we already talked about Joseph Watt of Razormaid remix fame. He mixed the record. I'm not sure about this. Maybe you can confirm. Is this the only record, the only full album that he has really remixed or has mixed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's only one album, and I think that's why Brian's so upset, because it was a fantastic album. It was probably in my playlist for like 3 or 4 years. I mean, it was like I always had the CD in my car. For me, every song on the album was good. Actually, every song on the album was great. And so I would have loved to have seen a sophomore effort by the band with new songs, but it never materialized with that kind of music, unfortunately.
It's pretty crazy that Joseph Watt agreed to mix this album, I should say. I mean, he did remixes too, of course, for the songs, but to mix the entire album, that was something he just, wasn't really into, but he did for this one. And
I love that Paul Robb, who I have referred to as the American Vince Clarke on a previous show, I love that he got involved as well. Because especially at this time, I thought he was the bee's knees. The self-titled Information Society and Hack, those 2 albums, I thought they were awesome. So I was excited to see his name here.
Yeah, the album was released. I don't have an exact release date for this album. I think it was released in around July of 1989.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into the reviews.
So let's see what people thought about the album, what the music press thought about this album when it came out in 1989. So Release Magazine, which is a website I often find myself on, they say, if there was ever an equivalent to the Super Mario Brothers in the synth-pop world, the Reynolds brothers of Red Flag have to be the most likely candidates. With their critically acclaimed 1989 debut album, Naïve Art, the synth-pop community embraced them wholeheartedly. So it doesn't go in depth on the music itself, but I loved the the metaphor comparing the Red Flag brothers to the Mario brothers.
So funny. Neither of them have a mustache. All right. Well, I have one review from the time. You know, I always like to find reviews from the time period. Could not go to my go-to smash hits because this was not a US or a UK album. So I did spend a lot of time working through the archives of Billboard and Cashbox magazine, and that's where I found a lot of the information for this album and these songs. And I did find a Billboard album review from July 15th, 1989. And it says, siblings Mark and Chris Reynolds dispense a synth-pop slab that won't serve up any big surprises to modern rockers, but will tickle the ears of anyone with an enthusiasm for early Depeche Mode. If I Ever makes a nice, accessible lead-in for this hardly naive set, which is aimed squarely at the modern dance set.
So I appreciate that they like the album. I'm going to take a front, or I'm going to disagree with something they say. This album is going to appeal to fans of, well, what do they consider early Depeche Mode? This doesn't sound like Speak and Spell and Broken Frame. Like, the thing that shocks me is it took Depeche Mode 4 albums to get to Some Great Reward. When you listen to this album, I put their songwriting on par with Some Great Reward. So that's the Depeche Mode that I always associate this with.
I 100% agree. This doesn't sound like Vince Clarke early Depeche Mode. This sounds like more like, you're right, the 1985 Depeche Mode sound. But I still think they all also have a very unique sound of their own, too.
Yeah, I agree as well. People were very quick to compare them to Depeche Mode, but if you're a fan of Depeche Mode, I think you hear a lot of differences. I remember at the time trying to trick one of my friends, who was the guy who got me into Depeche Mode, into trying to trick him into thinking this was a Depeche Mode song, and he knew right away it wasn't.
Uh-huh.
How do you know? Like, everybody says they sound like Depeche Mode, and he was like, well, I think it because I know Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
I agree. They don't sound like, definitely don't sound like Speak and Spell, which we just spent a lot of time discussing. But I have some notes on some of the songs we're going to discuss where I do think that there are elements that are similar to earlier Depeche Mode, not Some Great Reward, but before that. And I'll point them out very specifically. But, you know, the overall product I think we're getting is a much more sophisticated product than probably like Broken Frame as a whole, for sure.
Yeah, when I listen to Naïve Art or listen to Red Flag in general, you know, David Gahan of Depeche Mode has a very dark, haunting voice. That's definitely not Red Flag, right? And then you have Rob Rowe of Cause and Effect. His voice is a more powerful European-sounding voice. Definitely not Red Flag. Red Flag's got a softer voice, I think, and a little higher tone of voice, and a little softer sounding voice to me than those two guys. They're very powerful electro-pop artists, right? And some people ask, like, what's the difference between synthwave and synth-pop and electro-pop, right? And it's difficult sometimes to know the difference. The main differences are synthwave. Just think about like Back to the Future. Think about like just that synthy sound that kind of came out in the 80s, that Vangelis, that's really weird kind of sound. That's synthwave. And then you've got synth pop, which is like erasure, you know, more of that, just the pop part of it, right? People think about synth pop, but think about the second word in synth. It's pop. It's dance pop. It's pop music. It should be it should be top 40 music if you ask me, but it's not. But it should be in my personal opinion. Then you have electro pop, which is very more edgy synth music, right? Depeche Mode falls into, a lot of their music falls into that. There's Zymox. There's so many different bands that Nitzareb fall into that more industrial electropop, harder sound. Nine Inch Nails could be probably considered an electropop band as well. And just a harder, more industrial sound is more on the electropop side, where I think Red Flag was just straight up synth pop, like textbook synth pop in my personal opinion.
I agree. Have you heard anything off of Nine Inch Nails' Tron soundtrack?
Yeah, I really like it a lot.
Oh, cool.
Oh, good. Because I absolutely adore the Daft Punk soundtrack for the other album. So I'm very eager to know how Nine Inch Nails does.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of it's going back to the early days of Nine Inch Nails with some of the stuff he put out. So Pretty Hate Machine fan, you know, like that for me, that was just an album that was just changed everything for me. So glad to see he's going back to some of that sound. It was really cool stuff he's putting out.
Nice. I'm excited.
All right, you said you have one more review?
I have two more reviews, but
two.
I just have some notes that I plugged into the middle of this page and didn't know where to put them. And it was comments from Chris on being compared to Depeche Mode. So since we just sort of talked about that, I'll just read these to you.
Sounds good.
This was from that same Russian interview in 2012. The comparison to Depeche Mode in the early years was constant, and it began to be really annoying, not just for us, but for every electronic band. Yes, we really liked Depeche Mode, and we liked many other bands as well. Depeche Mode just happened to be the one electronic band that everybody knew of. There weren't many others that got radio airplay back then. We didn't set out to be like Depeche Mode. We just were in the same vein as them, along with a whole group of other great electronic bands. The reality is that when we first started out, the technology in synthetic music was very limited. I mean, we were extremely limited by the sounds that we had access to. At that time, we didn't have a huge catalog of sounds that are available today. If one wanted to create something vastly original, it required you to meticulously record samples from your environment, which we did, but it was painstaking. All bands were basically limited to a certain number of sounds, hence a certain sound. Our music grew and varied as our universe of sounds expanded and our gear improved, and I am certain it was the same with other bands, even Depeche Mode. So you know what? That all makes sense to me. You see footage in like 1985 recording Some Great Reward, Depeche Mode like recording, throwing pebbles down a brick sidewalk. So they were really, really into it for a while. A couple years where they were, I think with Gareth Jones, I think he probably spurred them on. And then maybe when they worked with Bascombe on Music for the Masses, they got away from it. But there was that period of time where Depeche Mode loved creating new sounds. And I think that's partially what sets them apart from a lot of the other bands.
Yeah, because they literally made new music. They made new sounds. They knew they had a limited palette to work with. So they just we have to make our own.
Yeah, there's videos of them banging on pipes and sampling all kinds of things to make their own sound. So it's interesting that Red Flag, Chris and Mark said they didn't have access to a lot of sounds back then. Sounds like the difference was people who were very innovative and decided to get out there and figure out a sound of their own, which Depeche Mode definitely had the sound of their own. But everybody, I mean, it wasn't just a Red Flag problem. Every band was compared to Depeche Mode back then. Every single one.
But can I say, if you don't want to be compared to Depeche Mode, maybe another thing you should consider is not trying to look exactly like Martin Gore. Because I'll tell you what, Mark Reynolds is a Martin Gore clone.
There's a lot of bands out there that don't sound like Depeche Mode from that time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Nobody ever compared Erasure to Depeche Mode.
No.
I mean, Vince Clarke left, and because Vince Clarke took his sound with him. You know, he took the Speak and Spell sound and just moved it over to Erasure. You know, so
Right.
there was Depeche Mode sound changed after Vince Clarke left, and so that became his sound, and he took it with him. And so it's funny, yeah, there was a lot of bands that sounded like Depeche Mode, and you're right, a lot of bands, I never even thought about that, looked like Depeche Mode or tried to look like them to maybe try to put the association together, right, with black and white covers and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought that Mark was like, I love Depeche Mode, so I want to try to look like someone in Depeche Mode. When we get to the Russian radio video, I think we're going to talk about that some more.
And I mean, Chris doesn't look all that dissimilar from Dave with his haircut.
Right.
Like he's standing in the background on the album cover, like slightly behind Mark, kind of looking like Dave.
I mean, he's got short, dark hair.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I understand it's his hair.
Like,
I mean,
right. Yeah. It's still.
Well, you had to look cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Electricity Club said this about the album. An enjoyable, if derivative, long player. Although their music was melancholic, Red Flag had less of the pessimistic doom that had hung over Depeche Mode's output since Black Celebration, and more akin with their fourth album, Some Great Reward. So
Oh.
I actually had that thought myself, guys. I didn't
Okay.
realize that I stole it from this blog. The Reynolds brothers handily sounded the way they looked during this period and had credible American producers to realize their initial vision. I love that sentence. They sounded the way they looked. And I love that it gives credit to these producers. Something I was wondering, Matt, when you were talking about the fact that some of their later stuff was muddy sounding. I didn't bring it up at the time. I didn't want to say anything bad, really. But I was wondering if maybe some of that muddiness comes from the fact that they don't have access to big producers like Joseph Watt and Paul Robb later on.
It could absolutely be that. You know, you look at when they released Naïve Art with Joseph Watt's remixes, things changed a little bit. There's a few songs on there that don't sound the same. So yeah, it's definitely possible.
And then my last review is from allmusic.com. It says, Red Flag, like other late 80s, early 90s bands such as Camouflage and Cause and Effect, offer a similar mix of gloomy, synthesizer-driven dance pop made popular by synth rock kings Depeche Mode. Seriously, every review brings up Depeche Mode. Derivative, yet melancholic, Naïve Art is a decent debut, although it eventually runs out of steam. Red Flag's obvious debt to Depeche Mode is immediately apparent in minor club hits, If I Ever, and Russian radio. Though the production is a bit rough around the edges, The combination of cold synth beats and the emotionless vocal approach, similar to Depeche Mode, makes perfect dance floor fodder for the disaffected goth pop club crowd. Like Depeche Mode's best work, what makes Naïve Art bearable is Red Flag's obvious gift of songcraft. Both If I Ever and Russian Radio are comparable to some of Depeche Mode's best work, and although much of Naïve Art sounds the same after a while, the album flows along quite nicely. Those who criticize Depeche Mode for being pretentious and wimpy certainly won't find any redeeming qualities in Red Flag, but Naïve Art should satisfy fans of the genre. Recommended. Peppered through there are a bunch of comments that I think are worth note, like the sentence, like Depeche Mode's best work, what makes Naïve Art bearable is Red Flag's obvious gift of songcraft.
Bearable.
Yeah.
Interesting choice of word there.
By the end of the sentence, they're actually complimenting both acts for their songwriting, but on the way there, using the word bearable makes you think, what are you saying?
There's a lot of that kind of backhanded compliment stuff going on there. Like, well, if you like this kind of thing.
I think the reason we gravitated to bands like Red Flag is because they didn't sound like Depeche Mode. I think they had their own unique sound. If you could name another band that sounds like Red Flag, no, not one comes to mind, like that specifically sounds like these guys from this era.
Mm-hmm.
There's just the way they do their synths, the songwriting, the structure of the songs, and his vocals. I just don't see anything out there that sounds like them. Not to me, anyway.
And that's because we're all fully immersed in the synth pop world. You know, I think because we are so familiar with those artists and that kind of music, like it's our thing. If you played this for somebody who's less familiar with synth pop, they would probably think it was Depeche Mode. They would not be able to draw the distinction. So I think part of it, our problem, quote, is that we are just so hyper aware of the differences between each band.
Hence why I do kind of do deeper dives on my show for this very reason, because I think a lot of people sometimes do categorize a lot of bands in the same spot, right?
Yeah. It makes me think of your cousin Tony, who would call all of your music erasure.
Yep.
He thinks everything you listen to is erasure.
That's right. I forgot about that. Good old cousin Tony.
Well, Red Flag would definitely be closer to Erasure than Depeche Mode in my personal opinion. They're a little happier.
Yeah, right. I have this little bit of information, just like you had those quotes from the interview you weren't sure where to throw. And I have this little snippet that I'd like to share now with you guys. I found this article and I was diving deep into all the Billboard magazines from February 25, 1989. And they did an article about Salt Lake City and Provo, Utah radio stations that were playing like modern and alternative music.
Sarah, if you're friends with John Lamoureux of the Hustle podcast, aren't you? Then you should know that Salt Lake City is a hive and a hotspot for the new wave sound. Even to this day, Howard Jones sold out a baseball field.
I know. Baseball stadium.
Yeah, stadium.
I know. And now I have proof that he is not just blowing smoke. Like he talks about that at length. And I think our friend of the show, Shannon Strait, also mentioned that recently.
True.
That how Salt Lake City was like a really big area for modern and alternative music. Well, this article talked about the station KZHT Hot 94.9, and they actually gave a list of songs that they might play in a certain evening. And Red Flag was listed. Like they actually listed Red Flag by name when they were talking about bands that they would play. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. Maybe we can get John or Shannon to chime in and say, see if they ever heard Red Flag on the radio back in the day when they were living out there.
We'll have to ask them. Did you know about this, Matt, about Salt Lake City being like a hot spot for all these bands that we love, even to this day?
This is new news to me, actually.
Yeah. Our friend John hosts a podcast called The Hustle, and he gets a lot of great bands on to be interviewed. And he always mentions, like, I grew up in Salt Lake City. Do you have any stories about coming through that area? And the artists always say, yeah, I remember we were super popular there. We would come through, we'd make sure we came through Salt Lake City on our tour because we did so well. You know, I always think of our bands being popular in California. You know, I was trained to think K-Rock was playing them and all the kids there loved it and stuff. I never would have guessed Salt Lake City was the same story.
I wish we had a station like KZHT because I have a list of some of the songs they were playing. Gene Lug, Jezebel, The Motion of Love, Information Society, Walking Away, Rick Astley, Together Forever, Duran Duran, All She Wants Is, Red Flag, Russian Radio, George Michael, Monkey, Curiosity Killed the Cat, Misfit, Escape Club, Shake for the Chic. We never heard that one. We only ever heard
Wild West or whatever.
Little Respect by Erasure. yeah, really cool stuff out there. I just thought that was neat that they mentioned Red Flag in the same breath as some of these other artists.
That's killer. That's just good to see that that's happening there.
I saw your eyes get wide like mine did. I think I saw it when she mentioned All She Wants Is by Duran Duran. Are you a fan of the Big Thing album?
I love the Big Thing album, actually.
Nice. That's my number one.
But I'm a fan of all things Duran Duran. So I see Duran Duran every time they play. I just got the tickets to their January 8th show. They're going to be playing here in Los Angeles. So I'm going to be seeing them in January. I saw them December 30th of last year in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
They are just the best band live.
They are so good. And what a great way to start your new year. That'll be a fantastic show, I'm sure.
I get out to a lot of concerts. They're getting expensive, though. It's an expensive hobby. I wish I could get some free tickets to some of these things.
Yeah,
Hey, I play your music. Where's my free tickets?
Right.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
We still have to talk about the songs, the 4 songs that we've chosen to talk about. And we're going to also point out why we selected these 4 songs. But before we get to that point, let's talk about our personal history with the album, guys. And this is just sort of like our, remembrances that we have or any stories that we think are worth note from the time period, the late 80s when we were walking around with Red Flag in our Walkman. So we'll start with our guest, DJ Matt Williams of Synthpop Symphony. Matt, do you have any good personal history with this album? Well, you already told us one.
I mean, it just was a great album. I mean, it was at the time I was DJing at the clubs and synth pop was huge. Erasure, Depeche Mode, all that stuff was big. And Red Flag hit the airwaves, and those 12-inch singles came out, and it was just, from a club perspective, was just massive. I mean, I could fill the dance floor every single time playing Russian radio. That was just not a problem. And then to the radio stations, it was also really popular as well. So just one of those bands that just filled in all the blanks for me, where I didn't get from Depeche Mode, I got from bands like Camouflage and Red Flag and other bands like that. So it was a really, really good time in my life listening to that music. I just enjoyed it immensely. I wish there was more of that, but there just isn't. But it was a great time to listen to that record.
And you mentioned earlier that you got to meet them on that tour, have them sign your record. On that night that you got to meet them, who did you find to be more talkative?
Neither. They were both very shy.
They must have been 18 years old at the time, right? Because
I was 19. Yeah. So they were 2 years younger than me. So they were 17 when they showed up to the club to play. Isn't that crazy?
It is. Yeah. No wonder they were shy. They were just awkward teens still.
They showed up and they just didn't say much. They played their show, and then backstage I said, "Hey, can you sign my records?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." And they just signed them for me, and I didn't really get to have much of a deep conversation about life with them, unfortunately. But maybe at 17 years old, maybe they didn't have a lot to say. I don't know,
Yeah, I believe that. Did they personalize their autograph, or is it just a signature?
It's just a signature. Yeah. It should say Matt's the best on it.
I know, that's what I was thinking.
Seriously.
It should have said, "Matt is the best. Thanks for playing us on Synthpop Symphony." It's on synthpopsymphony.com, even though that didn't exist at the time. They should have written it.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Would have been nice, guys.
Yeah. Well, so I first heard Red Flag on a college radio station. It was WVU. U92 was the name of that station at the West Virginia University. And that was my first semester of college. I was out on my own, listening to music, making my own tapes off the radio.
Because we were no longer seeing each other.
We were, yeah.
I copied stuff for you through high school, but we went our separate ways, and we had no way of getting in touch.
Yeah, you were off at another college. I was in another state. You didn't even know where I was at first. I had to send out postcards to my friends and give them the address of my dorm because I didn't have it until I got there. I'm used to you making all these copies for me. I found myself forced to go out and buy records on my own, buy music on my own. But I heard Red Flag and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I have to own this. So I went to the local music store and bought a copy of the tape myself. And I was like so excited. It was probably right around this time of year. It's probably September of 1989 that I bought this Red Flag cassette. I had written to you and let you know where I was at school. And then lo and behold, I got a letter back from you, probably in October, the beginning of October, that I got a letter from you. And since music was the big thing that we had in common, there was a whole paragraph in this letter about devoted to music. I have the transcript right here. You said, I thought of you today because I got the import for Personal Jesus by DM and Drama by Erasure. Too bad you aren't here to make me copy them for you. We have a radio show on our campus station from England, so I heard both those songs plus the new Thompson Twins single before they were out here. Look for Martin Gore's solo EP and Red Flag. They are both great. or I could copy them for you over Thanksgiving.
So see what I did there, Matt? I dangled free music in front of her as long as she would agree to get together with me over Thanksgiving.
Yeah, this was before we were actually a couple, a dating couple. We were just still friends.
So at Thanksgiving, don't bring the cranberry sauce, just bring the Erasure records. And
Yeah, right.
That's right. So I always tell people that not only would the podcast not exist, but we also would not be married if it wasn't for Red Flag. Because I really feel like the point of that letter, the main thing I wanted to get across to you, was I have to let you know about this band called Red Flag that I've discovered because I didn't know that you had discovered them.
Believe it or not, I was actually able to find out about music on my own when I went off to college. Surprise, surprise.
Hey, that was the era of the independent, strong woman.
Yeah.
sometimes people like Brian and I, we just assume nobody knows about any of the music that we listen to,
Yep.
right? We just have to be the ones who have to tell everybody, hey, have you heard about this band? They're like, of course I've heard of this band. I've known about this band for a long time.
Well, and he has a very good history of, that really was what he did for me back in high school. Like, I wasn't seeking out this stuff. He just brought it to me. So I didn't really have to work hard. But I did find out about this music because I was listening to the radio at school. And that radio show that you mentioned, I'm guessing that was probably Rock Over London.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, they played that Sunday nights in a lot of places. I think they played it at WVU too. And well, that was a great show. Great way to get introduced to new music from across the pond.
And I'd have to think the new Thompson Twins song that I'm talking about was probably Sugar Daddy, right?
Yeah, had to be in 1989.
I like that song.
A lot of people don't like it because of all the guitars. I'm actually a fan of the Big Trash album.
Yeah, me too.
It's awesome to have Tom Bailey back going around the world singing pop music again. Isn't that amazing?
I'm going to see him soon. His shows have not aligned with my schedule, but I've heard from people who've gone that Tom Bailey puts on a show, like a great show. So,
Oh, yeah.
And every song is one you remember as being a huge song, not just on the charts, but in your life.
Yeah, such a wonderful thing that we've been able to see him perform those songs live again. It's something we never expected to happen.
my favorite Thompson Twins song is not even a dance track, but If You Were Here. The
yeah.
song
Oh, yeah.
From
16 Candles.
16 Candles at the very end. Just what a great track.
He actually has written a final verse to it, like a new final verse. So there's a little bit of a surprise to it that you won't recognize.
Okay, I have one more piece of information related to my personal history with this band, with this album. Crazy thing. I didn't even remember it right away. And then when I brought it up today, you were like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was crazy. It was like 30 minutes before we were getting on with you. Sarah says, hey, do you know what I just thought of? And I hadn't thought about this, but as soon as she posed the question, I knew exactly what she was going to say. And I just started cracking up.
Yeah. Red Flag is the only band that I ever wrote to join their fan club. I don't know. I was just so enamored with them. I loved them so much. And I'm like, I need to know more about Red Flag. So I wrote to them to join the fan club. But stupidly, I used my college address rather than my home address.
Like your dorm room.
Yeah, like my dorm room. So 212B Arnold Hall in West Virginia. I don't know if that dorm room even still exists, but if if they were getting like Red Flag information like years later, I don't know. I did get like one postcard, I think, from Red Flag. Like after I signed up, they're like, thanks for joining the fan club. And like that was probably it because I was only in that dorm room for one college year and then I moved on. So duh.
And the worst thing is that I think I read that all the James Bond information, their James Bond song, and the whole story of it was sent out to members of the fan club. That was the only way to find out.
Shut up.
And so you could have known about this, but you had to use that address.
Not like either of us could have like rejoined the fan club with a new address. The address was right on the back of the tape.
I guess, but you had already done it once. I wasn't about to do it
I see.
a second time.
Well, at least it's easier to get a hold of our favorite bands now, right? We're
That's
not having to rip off things and mail things in and try to get responses back. But hey,
Yeah.
the subsequent people that moved into that dorm room may have found out about red flags because of you. So
Right.
they got the letters and they opened them up and they're like, hey, who is this people? Wow, this is good.
Yeah, maybe
This is awesome.
maybe I introduced some new people to Red Flag because of my mistake. I
Yeah,
don't know.
maybe.
That'd be a good thing.
I have two friends that did terrible jobs of joining fan clubs, Sarah and the red flag thing. And then my buddy growing up, my best friend Beal, he joined the Oingo Boingo Secret Society like 3 months before the final album came out and they broke up forever.
Good timing.
But
Did the secret society let them know they were going to break up? Did they, at least the fans get the no?
Nope, he took him by surprise. I think before they broke up, they did send him a pretty nice book that was all the lyrics like published. I don't know if it was worth it.
Well, at least we tried. At least we joined fan clubs. Who would you ever write to and join their fan club?
I joined the Celtics Kids Club when I was in college. There was a time when I was in college, Matt, for some strange reason, I got really into the NBA. And my dad was always a Celtics fan, so I just decided to follow the Celtics. And I think it was the last year that Larry Bird played. Like, I never paid attention to basketball ever in my life. I went all in on the Celtics. I watched all the games. We didn't have TV in our dorm room at the time. I took a TV somewhere where I could hook it in to the cable and watch it. I'd sit there by myself watching basketball. I bought jerseys. And then I decided to join the Celtics Kids Club, which was open for kids 12 and under, but I just lied about my age. And then they sent me like coloring books and stickers and stuff. So that's what I joined.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if that's worse or better. I think that's worse.
Sounds worse.
Oh.
So thanks once again to DJ Matt Williams for joining us for this episode that you just listened to and for inviting us on his show, Synthpop Symphony, which can be found at synthpopsymphony.com. It was a lot of fun to talk about Red Flag, and luckily we're going to get to do it for another episode worth of conversation.
Yeah, that's right. I am really looking forward to getting into the songs themselves and really diving into that discussion. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, these songs are really, really good. If you don't know Red Flag, and you haven't determined from the little samples that we played so far in the show whether or not you like them, I think that when we get to the 4 tracks next episode, you're going to be won over.
Yeah, and don't forget, of course, you can also listen to full versions of these songs on Matt's episode of Synthpop Symphony, number 294.
The 4 songs are played in their entirety, including an extended mix of your song, Broken Heart.
That's right.
So that is our next episode. We're going to talk about that with Matt once again. In the meantime, thanks to everybody who joined us, who found their way here from the Synthpop Symphony social media or from listening to the radio show. Before we get going, we have voicemail, Sarah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we love getting voicemails because we love getting other voices on the show other than ours, which is why it was a real treat to have Matt here.
Absolutely.
But this is a voicemail. This comes with a little bit of a history. If you are joining us for the first time, let me briefly set up this voicemail. This is from Dan.
Okay.
Friend of the show, Dan. I mentioned in our last episode, we were talking about the guero,
Oh, yes.
like this musical instrument that really does sound like you're just kind of like cracking dry bones or scraping a comb over dry bones or
Yeah.
something like that. It has this very distinctive, cool sound.
Yeah, real kind of crackly sounding.
And as we were talking about it, I thought back to a time that made me very happy and entertained me in a weird way, where we ended one of our episodes. It was about the Thompson Twins, and
Yep.
we talked about a song that had a guaro in it. And I ended the episode when it was all said and done. I put like 12 minutes of just a guaro playing. Just
12-minute Guero remix,
Yeah.
except there was no really mixing going on.
And I just thought it was funny. People would hear it and say, like, how long did he put this here for? 12
Yeah.
minutes? Oh my gosh. And then delete the episode. But unfortunately, one person let us know that they had been riding their bicycle on a very heavily trafficked road with earbuds in, and their phone was in their backpack or in a pouch somewhere. So they had to keep their hands on the bike, and they couldn't easily get to their phone anyway. And they thought, well, I'll just keep listening. And they had something queued up to go next when our episode ended.
Uh-huh.
Except for our episode didn't end. Went on for 12 minutes. They had to subject. They had to hear the guaro for like 12 minutes. To me, that was delightful. But I guess if you were living through that experience, it probably wasn't great.
You're on a bicycle navigating through traffic and you're listening to a Guero over and over again. Yeah, probably not the best experience ever.
So in our last episode, I mentioned that, how funny I thought it was, how delighted I was. And I said, unfortunately, I can't remember the person's name. I remember the message, but I couldn't remember who sent it. Well, we got a voicemail from the poor unfortunate bike rider. So that's the stage. It's now set. And here is the voicemail from Dan.
Hey, Brad and Sarah. Dan from Omaha, longtime listener, and unfortunately, the hapless victim of your Guiro. The fact that you did it again on your first summer episode tells me that you're a very sick person, and I'm about to call the cops if you do it again. In all seriousness, love the podcast. The fact that you guys did a 5-episode podcast on Duran Duran, just on one album, is amazing. Rio is a masterpiece, and you guys are both masterpieces. Thanks for everything you do, and thanks for keeping the podcast going.
Well, I'd hate to think that the cops are about to burst in here, Sarah, and interrupt our recording because of the fact that I went to the Guaro gag a second time.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, the first time it was 12 minutes of Guaro. And Dan, let's be honest, I only put it on there for about 11 seconds this time. So,
That's not too bad.
I was hoping you could overlook it. And I was also hoping that it wouldn't re-spark that trauma that you lived through the first time. But I do feel a little bad because I could tell in your voice that it was a painful experience. So I do apologize.
Yeah.
And I guarantee no more Guero on this show ever again.
Ooh, wow. That is a harsh statement, a very strong statement from you. But I guess we'll see. Anyway, it sounds like he did forgive us. He said some really nice things about us at the end there. So thank you so much, Dan, for listening, for your kind words, and your patience with the Guero.
Yeah, and thanks for listening to all. Was it 5 parts that we took to talk about Rio?
A long time.
Yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed our quick look at the violence of summer, love's taking over, in our second summer episode, which is, as you learned, if you did listen, one of my very favorite Duran Duran songs.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to talk about Duran Duran again sometime soon.
I think we can make that happen.
Yeah, I don't know what album it would be, though. There's so many good ones.
I know.
So we'll keep that in mind, and we'll let you guys know when that's coming up.
We sure will.
So thanks again, Dan, for taking the time to reach out and reintroduce yourself to us. It was a treat.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And thanks to anyone who wants to send us a voicemail. I'll thank them in advance for sending us a voicemail. If you want to do that, there's 2 ways you can do so. You can call our Google number, which is 724-490-8324, or you can go to speakpipe.com/permrecordpod and record a voicemail there, and we'll be happy to play it for you.
Yeah, we love getting those, so I know it takes a little time and effort on your part, but they always do get played on the show, which is nice, so feel free to do that. Also, feel free to follow us on social media. We're at Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. Just search for Permanent Record Podcast, and you'll see our little 45 record adapter there, and you know that's the mark of quality, excellence, and authenticity.
And coolness.
And coolness, yeah. And you learned in this episode that you just listened to how to properly use one of those 45 record adapters. So I hope that was information that you deemed valuable.
Again, we're all about education here, teaching people all kinds of stuff.
We really are. So thanks again to DJ Matt Williams for inviting us onto his excellent show, Synthpop Symphony, found at synthpopsymphony.com. And thanks for joining us, making time in your schedule to hang out with us here on our podcast. It's been a real treat to talk about Red Flag, and I'm looking forward to releasing part 2 as soon as I can, probably in a week.
Oh, sounds good. We'll see you then.
All roads lead to you. Words are said, lines are drawn, easily fears are born. Seems a little like way back when we make a bond, ring the steel, take a vow, form a seal. Love forsakers, should we break that seal? And that's why our love's like this, a search for tenderness. In song I tell you this, all roads lead to you. Lover, uncover another discovery. Discover the music. It's all I can do. All roads lead to you. It's not what I say, it's just that I can't play this game any other way. Words are said, lines are drawn, easily fears are born. Seems a little like way back when we make a bond, ring the steal, take a vow, form a seal. Love forsaken, should we break that seal? And that's why our love's like this, a search for tenderness. Song I tell you this, all roads lead to you. Lover, uncover another discovery. Discover the music. Lover, uncover another discovery. Discover the music. 'Cause all roads